Because if you're involved in the gay and lesbian lifestyle, it's bondage.
Hello and welcome to the Amateur Skeptics podcast number 55. With me this evening, Kimberly.
Hey everybody, I just put down, I'm reading two books right now. I've got The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, waiting for the movie this weekend, and Religion for Atheists by Alain de Botton, which is very interesting so far.
Very good. And Ian?
Okay, hello. I am right now reading Gods of Mars, the second of the John Carter book.
Very good. And Mac?
I am in the middle of Robert Jordan's The Fires of Heaven, with 4 books behind me and too many more to go.
And our very special guest tonight, Michael Clifton, Agent of Doubt.
I'm reading my own autographed copy of No Snowflake in an Avalanche by Mikey Weinstein, the president of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. I saw him on the 3rd.
Oh,
nice.
And it's a great book.
And of course, I'm your host, Brian. And I read this week. I read Sam Harris's Free Will. I ran out and got that. I just finished reading Attack of the Theocrats, and the author was just on Point of Inquiry. That was a really good book, actually. I would highly recommend that one. And 4th book of George R.R. Martin's series, Story of Fire and Ice. And I'm about to start Judas Unchained by, no, I can't remember his name.
I think it's A Song of Fire and Ice, isn't it?
A Song of Fire and Ice, yeah. But the one, it's the sequel to Pandora's Star, and I cannot remember the author.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, all right. Announcements.
I'll tear through
go
some
quick.
announcements here. Okay, coming up this end of the week, on Friday, March 23rd, Tornado Alley with Sean Casey at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. I believe that one's actually sold out, but should be a good one. I'm going to turn this one over to Ian for this weekend.
Okay. Yeah, this
Go
weekend is the 2nd annual Anomaly Con at the Tivoli Aurora campus. The main reason I put this in here is last year they did ghost tours of Aurora campus, and they're going to do those again this year, Saturday and Sunday at 11. Also, Saturday evening, apparently there's going to be some UFO thing. My guess is they'll be done by Jason Cordova, who's an actual friend of mine, but I guess he does presentations like this, on showing evidence of UFOs and stuff like that. So it'll be the other side of the coin from our podcast, presenting their case. So it's a steampunk convention. It's fun. Lots of stuff going on, but there will be some, stuff that's to what we focus on.
That sounds great. I'm going to try to stop by this year, so I'll look you up.
Cool.
All right, going on Sunday the 25th, Mile High Skeptics has, I don't know much about this, but a new little program they're doing in 2 parts on the myths of nutrition and fitness. So the first one will be on Sunday the 25th, and the part 2 will be on Sunday the April 1st. On Monday the 26th, Cafe Side 2 is having a presentation on ozone, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly. That might be really interesting. Wednesday the 28th, back at the Denver Museum, is 60 Minutes in Space. On Saturday the 31st, we have the IIG Colorado's monthly meeting. On the 2nd, the Mile High Skeptics are doing the Pseudoscience Fair with James Randi. And I'm going to let someone else talk about what's happening on the 4th.
On April 4th, the Pikes Peak Skeptic Society will be going to UCCS to see Bill Nye the Science Guy down here in Colorado Springs.
Are there still tickets available
awesome
for that?
Yes, there are.
Oh, all right.
I'll check into that for sure. The Mile High Skeptics are doing a road trip to Roswell. They're going to be going to the Trinity site for Easter, which is kind of fun. They're starting their road trip on Thursday, April 5th, and check out the site. It's a lot of really interesting information. I wish I kind of had the time to go. I'm sure there'll be lots of fun stories out of that. And just to wrap it up, on Sunday, April 8th, Humanists of Colorado have their monthly meeting. On Thursday, the 12th, the museum has a program called Yuri's Night, commemorating the launch of Yuri
Gagarin.
Thank you.
The Soviet cosmonaut, right?
Exactly. That historic flight. That might be really great. And then coming up in May, on Saturday the 5th, is going to be Skepticamp Colorado. And those are always great. We'll probably be talking more about that soon.
Yeah, and actually,
And that's
a little quick thing about Skeptic Camp. We focus on the stuff going on in Colorado. There's Skeptic Camps going on all around. It's international now, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
It is. It got started here in Colorado by our friend Reed.
Yep.
But yeah, they're doing them all over. It's great.
So if you're interested in doing a Skeptic Camp and you don't live in Colorado, look it up. Put Skeptic Camp, whatever city, state you live in, see what's going on, be active, hunt them down. You know, I know we have listeners outside of Colorado, so I want to make sure I'm mentioning that, because Skeptic Camps are fun. They're great. They're free. You go, you meet the other skeptics in the area, and if there's not one in your area, figure out how to start one. That's how it works.
Exactly.
You just, I will probably bring it up every podcast until Skeptic Camp is encouraging people to go out and be part of it. It's worth doing.
And great point. Yeah, start one up yourself. It's real easy. We've got a group putting this one together. We've just met a couple of times on the phone. And I've been on the boards of them before, and they're easy to set up. You get lots of really great experience, and start it up, make a new tradition out of it. I think this is the 5th or 6th one in Colorado. So
yeah. So we should talk quickly. Kimberly and I went to the Metaphysical Fair this weekend.
Sure did.
And hopefully we'll be doing a special on that, just talking about our experience and maybe some ways that we'll do things differently next time we go. You know, we got a lot of information this time, and I don't know. I had a lot of arguments this time, people.
You tend to do that, and that's okay.
Well, you know, I had my wingman. You know, I had Stuart with me, and so, you know, whenever they would say something that sounded sciencey but wrong, he would get them. The rest of the time, I would do all the questioning. So we almost got kicked out, I think. We got close.
Causing trouble.
Yeah, but so we'll talk more about that later. So our main thing this evening is we want to talk about marriage equality, and this has been coming up.
Actually, Brian, I put in there that short thing. I won't make a reference.
Well,
to,
this attaches to it, so that's kind of that's okay, right?
I just want to go over the fact that a couple podcasts ago we got some feedback of a listener who didn't agree with something we said, and he said he was going to stop listening to podcasts. And you know, that's obviously his free will. But the thing is, if we make a mistake and you catch us on it. Tell us. We want you to. I think we've talked about this before, and I like to bring it up every so often, especially when, you know, a listener does point out to us. It was a disagreement over the use of separate but equal. And he heard Kimberly say that in the podcast, and he was upset that the rest of us didn't call her on it. And technically, I do believe she used it in the wrong reference, and that's fine. And catching us on it and saying, hey, listen, I caught your mistake, that's what we want you to do, because that's part of why we're doing the podcast. Yeah. And the way we have the conversations here, we're not going to catch us on everything. Even stuff that we might know could skip. You know, we're not perfect. And right. Brian's the one that I think used this phrase first, but we look at this stuff as teachable moments. When we make mistakes, when something's said wrong like that, the prime example is the McDonald's coffee one, which we got called on way back when, and a new listener called us on it, and then he listened to the next podcast where he saw that we had been called on it and caught ourselves and corrected us. It's like, oh, I'm glad you guys did that, and that's what we want. So please, if you catch us in a mistake, call us on it, but don't stop listening to the podcast because of it. That seems to me to be the wrong way to go about it.
All right.
And I'll just be a little defensive that not all things that you disagree with are mistakes.
Well, and that's okay. and I actually, I mean, you can defend this, and I think that'll be fine. I'm not going to let you call me a separationist again, though. That was wrong of you.
Yes.
Shame on you.
Well, if you're a separatist, I'm an abolitionist.
It's okay to disagree. We enjoy disagreeing with each other. I don't mind disagreeing with listeners. Everyone's got opinions. That's awesome. So bring them up. Let's discuss them. Let's go further into them. And yeah, absolutely. We love the feedback.
All right, let's move on. We're moving on. We're done. We're moving on.
Okay.
All right.
At this point, what I've said is that my baseline is a strong civil union that provides them the protections and the legal rights that married couples have, and I think I think that's the right thing to do.
Voted along with the vast majority of Alaskans who had the opportunity to vote to amend our Constitution, defining marriage as between one man and one woman. I wish on a federal level that that's where we would go, because I don't support gay marriage.
I just believe in the unique status of marriage between man and woman.
What I'm asking you is how do you justify your beliefs based on what about 3 men?
Then why can't same-sex couples get married?
Well, they can get married. They can, but they abide by the same law as everyone else. They can marry a man if they're a woman, or they can marry a woman if they're a man.
Trying to avoid nuance, Senator. Do you support gay marriage?
No, Barack Obama nor I support redefining from a civil side what constitutes marriage.
Okay, so we're going to talk about marriage equality, and of course here we go again. We have 4 straight people and one gay person. All of us are very much, I think, in favor of this. Hopefully, we can try and make the con arguments as well as possible.
For those of you who aren't listening to our podcast regularly, try and pick out who the gay one is.
Okay. What a challenge that will be. All right. So, but I guess the first thing we need to establish here is why gays want to get married. And so I guess, I have to turn to Kimberly to address this.
Oh, I'm outed already.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's
okay.
Totally fine.
I mean, am I wrong? Isn't that the best place to start here?
I guess, and obviously I'm not speaking for all the gays out there. I'll just speak for my own gay ass. And I'm honestly not the best person to discuss why marriage is important, because I don't actually consider the institution of marriage, straight, gay, or whatever, all that important in modern society. And what I know I'll be kind of harping on here the entire time is, for me, it's an equal rights thing.
Okay.
I think everybody should have the right to do what they want. I think that doing, and I'm sorry to go straight back into what we were just discussing, but having a separate but equal, having a different term for the partnership between same-sex couples and opposite-sex couples is wrong. It's not equal. It's different. It's separate but equal, and it's no way to run something where everybody should be deserving of equal rights. I think not allowing it puts gay people into a second-class citizenship in this country, and I think that's really pervasive and insidious.
But that seems like part of the reason to make sure there's a distinct factor, to make him second. One of the things I've talked to my dad about is one of the reasons that the conservatives want to, make sure there's stuff like, they can't get married, they want to create the stereotypes of the age and all that going with the homosexuality, is because that way it helps keep them from being justified, keeps them from being legitimate. If they can get married and stuff, they suddenly become much more legitimate.
Well,
and the longer you can keep that from happening, the longer you can make sure it's an evil thing.
Let me see if I can make an even stronger argument as to why I think that this is important. And of course, and it comes back to equal rights. But there are a list of rights that you get from marriage that, and it may not be the only way to get all of these rights, but it's the primary way. Filing with taxes. Filing jointly on taxes as a couple. And I guess, family partnership under federal tax laws are different. So just because the state recognizes your marriage doesn't mean the federal government is. So you still don't get that right until the federal government accepts gay marriage. There's the state benefits. And I'm just going to read the headers here. I mean, I'm not going to go into the specifics. There's governmental benefits, employment benefits, medical benefits, death benefits, family benefits, housing benefits, consumer benefits, and it says other benefits and protections. So there is a lot of reasons that these couples should have these benefits. I mean, one of the things is that when your spouse is in the hospital, if they don't see you as, as being married and it's only immediate family, you're going to have a difficult time getting in there to see that person. I think that there is a lot to gain for people in these relationships by getting these benefits. And I think that that's not historically been the case. A marriage has changed a lot over the years.
Well, if we can, before we get into the history of marriage, because I think it's a whole another topic, and we should certainly get back to it.
Okay.
A couple of things I just wanted to say real quick. First of all, somebody really schooled me on this, and so I will share that teachable moment. You probably want to avoid calling it gay marriage versus marriage equality, and just the reasoning being that a lot of times we're told that, gay people are looking for special rights. And that's really not the case here. We're looking for equal rights. And we're not looking to have our own definition of marriage or anything like that. We want basically to use the same one that is that accepted thing that has all those different benefits you were just talking about. So I had been using gay marriage all the time as my platform thing, and somebody really kind of gave me all the reasonings for why to call it marriage equality instead, and it really worked for me. So I just thought I'd share that. This little list that you have here is great as a real overview, but I've been told that there's somewhere on the order of 1,500 to 3,000 different laws that would need to be changed if you did want to do this separate but equal kind of thing of civil unions and marriage and separate them out. Either you'd have to go in and change all of those laws one by one, which doesn't sound like it's going to happen anytime fast. I mean, we see how how quickly our government works. And it's just another one of those problems that gets called in when people want to rephrase the discussion with different terminology. And you're absolutely right. There is ways of doing all of this stuff, without marriage. It's a very costly burden.
Well, and it's jumping through hoops.
100%.
Yeah, you won't get all of these rights. It's jumping through hoops that I think are unnecessary.
And it also means, you go on there's all sorts of stories. People think, that some of these cases never happen, but they do. People die in hospitals while they're out of their hometown and encounter exactly this of, for, immediate family only. And because you're just a partner and not recognized, you're not allowed in the room. In my case, I've got all sorts of legal documents that say that my partner can come into the room and all. But if I'm on a trip somewhere, I'm not going to have that. And there's still that hoop jumping. Whereas if this was federally and recognized by state, if it was just a legal right, there wouldn't be any question. If someone's wife is in the hospital and you say, I'm the husband, nobody makes you pull out paperwork for that.
Right.
Because we all know what that means. And that's why it needs to mean the same thing for everybody.
Yeah. So I'm fine with calling it same-sex marriage. In fact, I usually do. In fact.
No, marriage equality.
Marriage equality. Oh, not even same-sex. We want marriage equality.
Right.
Marriage
the
equality.
difference is that we're not looking for special rights. It's for equal rights.
All right.
Yeah. No, it's a real subtle thing.
Yeah.
There's no beating up here or anything like that. It's just I have to watch myself.
Okay. All right. So now
I have a different perspective.
Well, hold on. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
One benefit from actually fighting every little legal battle of every little law that has to change is that you gain sympathy for marriage equality. I live in Colorado Springs, the hotbed of bigotry. I live down the street from Focus on the Family, okay? And many of the people who attend the mega churches around Focus on the Family would never want to see a same-sex couple having the right to have a foster child in their home or the right to adopt. They would never want that. But there are some things that they would agree on, and we can nickel and dime them all the way up to the other issues, such as they might want someone to be able to make a contract where they can make decisions about end-of-life issues. They might be okay with that. And if we show them how they're wrong on every little thing other than these things that they will not budge on, these stubborn issues, then maybe we can show the human side of things through all of these legal battles that are just, they're crazy outside of same-sex couples wanting them. Like if it was a heterosexual couple, you would never think that couple would be denied some of these things. And putting a human face on it is the benefit of fighting every little thing along the way, because it's so hard to just use one big rubber stamp and say, okay, they can marry now. That scares the bejesus out of the mega church goers in my city. So I think there is a benefit to pulling the Band-Aid off slowly, as it were.
Okay. So I think, go ahead.
Going off the idea of benefits, I put a link to a page called procon.org, which shows both sides of the argument. One of the interesting things I saw in the con argument was talking about how much it would cost the federal government to give same-sex benefits. And my main thought there was, okay, what if all those couples were to marry the opposite sex? Would it cost any different? And so, to me, it was one of the most absurd things to try and say, oh, look how much it would cost if we were to give same-sex benefits to them. And it's like, that's how much the benefits cost for a married couple.
In the same article, they say later that, of course, they have the right to marry somebody of the opposite sex.
Yeah, I like that one. That one's always fun.
Yeah.
I would like to know which one of these people would like to offer up their son to me, who I am never going to sleep with, for my opposite sex marriage. And I'm sure there's some would be very happy that, I have avoided my life of sin. I just think it's amazing. I'm wondering who's going to volunteer for this job. Who would like to marry me so that we're all in a heterosexual situation where there wouldn't be any sex or love going on. Yeah.
Yes, my fundamental mother calls that being covered.
I'm sorry, what was that, Michael?
My fundamental mother, she calls that being covered. It's a disgusting thought. And the same people are against polygamy, whereas the old Mormon church used to have polygamy. But if you were to push that on someone, that they had to marry someone of the opposite sex, but then that they're going to have relationships elsewhere, it's going to create that sort of polygamy situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just get together with a male gay couple and marry on up, Ken.
Yeah, I mean it's called bearding and I mean, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like if they kind of try to make this suggestion that if you just did it the right way, but then you have to realize that there's somebody else involved in it, and of course they wouldn't accept that. It's just such a silly kind of argument, It just, I don't know, that one I love. It's just so ridiculous.
So really, I want to start with the first one that's on here. And it says the institution of marriage has traditionally been defined as a man and a woman. And Michael, this is why you're here.
Okay.
I'm
here to explain that the institution of marriage was not always about a man and a woman. It was about estates and where your property will go when you die. Because women couldn't have property. For the longest time in human history, women couldn't have property. So even if the man died, it wouldn't go to the woman. It would go to her sons. So it wasn't about a man and a woman. It was a contract about where your property would go.
Right.
And so
that's an interesting point.
When did marriage start then?
Marriage as we know it?
No, not even.
I would say it's marriage as we see it right now. I'd say it started in a boom of marriages in the 1930s, where churches were pressuring couples to get married and create this image of marriage.
Wasn't that? It was.
I was going to say the 40s or the 50s. Yeah.
I was going to say 1891. There's a specific date when the fundamentalist churches kind of made a decree, and I had an article about that which I could not refine, but it was back in 1891.
It took a little while to take hold, though.
What's that?
It took a little while to take hold because a lot of it was peer pressure, community peer pressure.
Originally neither the government nor the church were really that involved in it. It was a much more personal thing. And, of course, they had to figure out a way to organize. My understanding is, several hundred years ago, you just said, hey, listen, we're a couple, and you're set. But what happened was, the guys would take advantage of that, get what they wanted, come back. The woman would claim they're married. The guy would say, what's she talking about? I have no idea. And, so finally it's like, okay, we have to have some sort of setup where we can keep track of all this and make sure that, it's more of a contract than just two people agreeing. So that's, I forget where I heard that from. That was my understanding of when marriage started to be more of a thing. Okay, the government has to get involved, has to be there making sure that it, isn't being abused.
The article I put in here, always a man and a woman, not true. It looks at, marriage at several, from different cultures historically, like the Egyptians. There's references in there that they might have had same-sex marriage. There's some evidence that the Catholics recognized same-sex marriage for the longest time. Or at least a few of them here and there, maybe not for a long time, but so even historically the Catholics have recognized same-sex marriage. So it has not always been between a man and a woman. That is a fallacious argument that we have.
And in fact, I mean, it's for most of human history, it's between a man and a woman and another woman and another woman, and then he might have another woman too, and concubines and slaves and all sorts of that kind of stuff. The Bible is not have a whole lot of examples from the Old Testament of one man, one woman marriages. In most cases, they were multiple marriages.
I don't think there's any.
Is that true? I don't know that. But
from the Old
can't think of any
Testament,
off the top of my head.
in the Old Testament, I mean, you go back. I mean, I don't know. Noah. How many wives did Noah have? Maybe Noah didn't. But like, you look at Rebecca and Laban, and I mean, you were marrying handmaidens and stuff like that. It was about children, who gave you a child first. But I mean, there was no
a male child.
Right.
That was the main focus, was you had to have a male child. If you had a female child, we'll sell it out.
Yeah. So,
but it really does go into more of a women's rights kind of thing. And when women were considered property, which has been the traditional ownership. We've talked about this on podcasts before, and I think it's, needs to be brought up again. Until I would argue almost until the industrial age, women were mainly in most societies, not every single one, not at all times, but very often seen as property. As Michael said, they couldn't own property themselves. They were, basically used for barter and trade and peace agreements and stuff like that, and married off, without regard for this romantic love of, one man, one woman, and, raising a nuclear family. The nuclear family itself is a brand new device. What would you call it? Not device. It's relatively new in the history of human beings. We didn't live just, the small mom, dad, and the 2.5 kids. That's very, very recent. And it's not even just recent, but very localized. And mostly families were far future than that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it didn't even exist as now.
So marriage is already threatened with high divorce rates between 40 and 50%. Mm-hmm. How is not allowing gays to marry going to protect straights from divorcing?
It won't.
There's no logic to that argument at all.
You don't think so?
Yeah, all they ever say is it further weakens the institution, which is already apparently, as you say, having all these problems.
I want to know how. I really would love to know. They say it will.
If people are going to get divorced, they're going to get divorced. Whether they're a same-sex couple, whether an opposite-sex couple, or whatever, they're going to get divorced if they're going to get divorced. People change, and they change in different directions.
And of course, the really funny bit is that when you start tracking this against the state, we can go across the entire world, but using the United States, the states that have marriage equality have the lowest divorce rates. Now, can you say causation there? Are the gays keeping the straights together? Probably not. But I think that kind of openness and education, because quite frankly there's an education correlation there as well. But something is going on. Massachusetts has been the lowest divorce rate, and it's the first one to back same-sex marriage. Yeah. Is that, you could say, is that a coincidence? Well, maybe, but
well, how long has it had the lowest divorce rate? Was it prior to backing same-sex marriage? Or
I don't
was
know
it
exactly
since?
how far it goes back, but I know it's been since they've legalized it.
They've also got a high population of liberals.
Well, they've also got a very high population of Catholics, though, too.
Yeah.
Massachusetts is Boston, Massachusetts is pretty much famous for Irish Catholic families. So,
but as an argument that we need to not allow this because it's going to further destabilize the institution, and then you look at the states that have the constitutional amendments against marriage equality, they've got some of the worst divorce rates. So it's they're clearly, it doesn't make any sense. The argument doesn't make any sense.
All right. Well, hey, wait. You guys stepped on Michael.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that, Michael.
Well, I don't think it would be hard to find a correlation between people that hate other groups of people and people that are prone to domestic violence in the home. It's no surprise to me that states that are more accepting of other people would be states with people who are able to work problems out in their own
And that
homes.
is a really good point. Thank you.
Now, just admit it's Kimberly and her partner who basically make us heterosexual couples stay together. It's just something about the fact that, they're there that keeps us together. You need to stand up and claim that right and say, yes, we're the ones doing it.
So I guess it's more contentious to say, is gay marriage really a different issue than interracial marriage?
Well, I mean,
I have a thought on this, and my thought on this from the beginning has been that keeping keeping same-sex couples away from marriage is a way of making them less than human, I think. To the right to form those bonds and form permanent bonds is one of the things that tends to make us human. And the issue with interracial marriages during the time period when that was illegal was that people of other races were considered less than human also. And so I think it's a form of dehumanization.
Well, that's why it said at the beginning. That's one of the reasons the conservatives want to keep it illegal, because that way it's naughty. It's wrong. You can't let it be legitimized, because once it becomes legitimized, they might actually start getting rights and start being accepted. And we can't have that.
Kimberly?
Yeah, gosh, you might start thinking you matter.
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of correlation between interracial marriage and same-sex marriage in a lot of different ways. Historically, and a lot of, I find really difficult to understand breaks with it. It is true that some states legalized interracial marriage early, and were not forced to by the federal government, but a lot of the states did, and that's what happened with the case law. And I don't have my dates, or I don't have any of this information in front of me. I apologize, but I'm pretty certain I'm going correctly on this. It came down to a Supreme Court decision that prohibiting interracial marriage was against the Constitution, and it was declared illegal. You couldn't ban it anymore, and basically that's why it's legal in the entire country. It's not like you have to get interracially married in California and then go back to Mississippi or anything like that. They were forced to do this, which brings up a whole nother area of all of this as to who should be making this decision. Should we be legislating marriage equality now, or does it need to come down to a court decision? And we're in the very interesting thing right now that it's kind of going in both directions, or kind of fighting towards the same goal of legalizing it, making it illegal. I think that's what will eventually happen, is that these constitutional amendments that say that marriages between a man and a woman are going to be kind of summarily overturned at some point in the future. Hopefully not too far. To Michael's earlier point, while I get what he's saying with fighting each and every individual battle and trying to help the poor bigots to accept this slowly but surely, I think anyone who's listened to this knows I don't have a whole lot of respect for the bigots, and I really don't care how quickly or slowly they learn their lessons. I think that's eventually how it's going to happen. I don't think we'd have interracial marriage in the United States of America in 2012 if we had left it to individual states to make decisions or to have the population vote on it. It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And it's impossible in 2012 to really even put yourself in that mindset. We are all far too young to understand how in the very recent past of America it was illegal. I mean, that just sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Isn't it almost impossible to imagine our country the way we know freedom, that happened?
Yeah. Michael, did you have anything to add to that?
And it's also the case that people are abandoning the road of looking for a majority to vote on things, because when women didn't have the right to vote, it would have been all men voting on it anyway. And, even if the men did vote as a majority to give women the right to vote, the better way would have been to have the legislature just make it a law, not put it up to a majority vote of whether or not the people think it should happen. Here in Colorado, activists gave up the ballot initiative that they had tried almost 30 times before to remove the ban on gay marriages. And, they could have gotten the signatures. It's only like 86,000, and a lot of different laws that are proposed through ballot initiatives, they use a service to collect the signatures, and they can get the funding. That's not the problem. I think they want to do it the right way by sending a message through the legislature or having a judge overturn the ban on gay marriage, rather than putting it up to a majority vote.
Right.
All right.
It's very promising. I mean, I know one of the articles we have here has a chart showing that more than, we're either at 50% or just a little bit more of the population now is in favor of granting the same rights to same-sex couples. And that's fabulous. I mean, I'm really proud of everybody for kind of, coming to the conclusion that there were human beings in their midst. But to exactly what Michael's saying, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter if we have a majority of people who think that some minority group group deserves a right. We're based we should be based on right is right. It doesn't need to be popular. It doesn't need to have that requirement. So while on one hand I think it's terrific, it shouldn't matter that people are coming around. It's great that they are, but that's not why this should happen.
Right.
It should happen because it's right.
Their coming around seems to hinge on the use of a word. Because if you call it marriage for them, you only get like 45% for it. But if you call it civil union, you get like 71%. And that one word creates this second-class citizenship, the separate but equal nature of what they're looking for. They want to, with that one word, with withholding the word marriage, they want to create this second-class, maybe it's not something that would apply legally, but especially socially, it would. It's saying you're not accepted like marriages are accepted.
Well,
so
I think we should withhold the marriage. I think we should withhold the word marriage from everybody, though. I think we should take it away from everybody. I think we should have civil unions for everybody, and that's all that that's all that should be legal under the government. Forget marriage.
Go, Kimberly.
I apparently put my ire on the wrong person. No. I totally apologize, Brian. It was Mac I wanted to smack. No, I'm not going to smack anybody. I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, it makes sense in a purely logical way that the government should be in charge of civil unions. That's what a marriage is. It's a union in civil court and civil law that builds a structure that we all understand. We commonly call that marriage. And while I appreciate the logic of it, the fact is, as we've talked about before, and you all know I'm pretty big on this, you just can't give up the word because it's easy and because it would get the people who don't like it, to kind of calm down. Because they'll just find another way of doing it. Plus, we've seen stuff like Hawaii, for example. I think this was 2 years ago. They kept saying, it's the word marriage. We think marriage should be sacred, but we're all for civil unions. So they got a bill up to vote. And again, I'm not for it, but they had a vote for the population to vote whether or not they were going to do civil unions. And they voted it down. They're a bunch of... Go ahead and put the censored tag up. They're a bunch of fucking liars. They say that because it's politically correct to say, I have no problem with civil unions, I just don't like the word marriage being used for this. But the fact is, they are bigots. I honestly have not met a single person who really believes that line. They say it all the goddamn time, but I have not met a single person who actually understands it and means it. They don't want the equality, and they know how impossible it is you're not going to get anyone to ever overturn anyone's marriage, like you're suggesting. It's an impossible strategy, and I think it's, as I chastised Brian online, wrongly, so wrongly, Brian,
but thoroughly.
thoroughly, it breaks the argument by having like a non sequitur. Like, it's not the issue in front of you. So while I get it logically, I just think it has to be scrapped.
I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
When you do give marriage to everyone and keep using the word and use it blanketly for any kind of union between two people, churches will come up with another euphemism for what they saw marriage as before. They might go to holy matrimony, and they might ask people if they were married in holy matrimony, and they still will have a way to show their uneasiness with other people's marriages.
Sure, but to the same point that I was just making, let them go ahead and spend all the time redefining it. Let them get the entire world to declare their marriage null and void and their holy matrimony to be what they've got. Let them work, because it's futile, it's a waste of resources, and it's not going to happen. I agree with you. They might do it, they may still look down on me. I have absolutely no dog in the race for getting churches to respect me, to accept me. I don't want to do my ceremonies there. I'm not asking them for any of that stuff. They can despise me tomorrow as much as they despise me today. I don't care. I just want the same rights because I'm a citizen of this country. Hate is as much of a right in this country as anything else, and they are free to hate me every day of the year. I'm not going to stop.
Are you okay? What if we do say, okay, we're going to have this thing called civil unions. It has everything that marriage has. Now, socially, it's going to have a stigma, right? That it's a lesser marriage. Is that a start, or is it unacceptable?
I'd say very unacceptable,
Okay.
because separate but equal worked so well for us in the past, didn't it? When things become socially stigmatized, people start putting up signs that say, only this type of person in this side and this type of person in this side. I don't know. It's a private establishment, so we can do that. It's not right.
It's not right, but I think that separate but equal brought things to a head and made things change socially for the better by its wrongness.
That's an interesting way of governing, though. There's probably lots of things you could do that way, but I don't think you'd be decent results.
No, and now that I understand the issue better now, I am no longer like the idea of just giving people civil unions. I do think that we, at this point, have to call it marriage, but we have to take back the word marriage.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those funny things where they, again, we let them use the language and they run roughshod over us, suggesting that, that somehow Christianity created marriage. Like, well, that's just plainly not true.
Right.
Have they been doing them? Sure, but the idea that they invented it is just so patently ridiculous.
The idea that the union between a man and a woman is recognized by God is something that even heterosexual atheists will have to come across, being married by a judge rather than in a church.
Well, I just performed.
I prefer a judge any day.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I actually performed a wedding ceremony. I like Brian and Mac here. I'm an ordained minister. Three of us are here, and the stories behind it all. But I actually did a wedding ceremony as a favor to friends, and I wrote up a little ceremony. And one of the things I decided to do, I have it on our website, but it's based off of Penn Jillette's 10 Commandments for Atheists, because I saw a lot of good stuff there that worked for it. But one of the things I wanted to do while doing it was I wanted to make sure I'm not the one making them a couple. All I'm doing is giving them a ceremony. They're the ones who are actually making the pledge to each other. They're the ones who are doing it. It has nothing to do with anyone else but the two of them. And that was one thing I emphasized throughout it, saying this is, the two of you, and this is what you guys have to work with as becoming the couple. There was nothing about God. There was nothing about, I now make you man and wife. I made sure to avoid that kind of stuff. Because to me, that marriage isn't about anything else but the couple.
See, and I don't know. I think that you should be imbuing them with the right to marry, so that if they divorce, it's your failure, not theirs.
Well, and there are some legal things there too. I just took a class like 2 weeks ago down in Orlando on being a celebrant with CFI, and I'm still kind of working out all the details of what I'm going to or not going to do with that. But anyway, you couldn't. If you said that, you would be basically breaking the law. You are not legally able to join them. I don't think anyway. There's ordained stuff that lets you do ceremonies, and then there's more legalese crap. And I don't want to get too much into all of that because I don't know all of it for Colorado. Actually, Colorado, I found out now that I'm thinking about it, actually has a thing where anybody can marry anybody. You can marry yourself.
Yes.
Like you can perform your own ceremony, and it is legally binding. So I take that back. In Colorado, you can. In other places, it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah. All right. So I want to go through a few more of their cons, some more of their vapid arguments.
Mm-hmm. I've got some on this. I've got some stuff on this also. That
Okay.
I'd like to
Let's go on to this.
talk about too,
So gay marriage could potentially lead down a slippery slope, ending with giving people in polyamorous, incestuous, bestiality, and other non-traditional relationships the right to marry.
Okay, and what's wrong with that?
Well, okay, I have issues with a couple of them.
Equality?
I have a couple with the
not considered normal? What was that? Wait a moment.
that are non-traditional relationships.
Non-traditional. Okay, well, okay. It's
So polyamory, I think we've already established, is kind of the norm.
Yeah.
Biblically.
No arguments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Incestuous. I got problems there.
And just about every culture would agree with you
All
on
right.
that one.
Bestiality.
You have now driven away from the idea of two consenting adults into a situation that is not being discussed here at all. We are not talking about anybody forming a partnership with anyone who is not a consenting adult.
Okay.
Polyamory is a little bit more complicated, and I can understand having restrictions on that just because of tax code stuff. I could understand saying, okay, you're going to have to basically sort this out in one way or another. But I mean, to maybe the overall point, I think it's fine to allow people to explore their lives and do what they want to do with it and stuff. I think the big problem here is consenting adults. And the idea of bringing bestiality into a talk like this, like suggesting that, well, if we're going to let the gays do it, we might as well let, man marry his horse. Are you really seriously thinking that a same-sex relationship is of the same quality as a person and their horse? I mean, or, no. People, the next one they'll do is people, what if people want to marry children? Again, we are talking about consenting adults in a situation.
People marrying children, that's biblical. Well, that's biblical stuff. I mean, you used to marry children. We don't now. Historically speaking, you married when you were, but for a woman, hey, if she's having her period, she's ready to be married.
Not just historically. On the other side of this planet, geographically speaking, there are people who are not of age to consent and also have their marriages arranged and aren't exactly consenting because their marriages were arranged for them.
And that's very traditional.
Well, in this idea
there are people who are considered to be of the age of consent in other places where we would consider them to be not remotely of the age of consent. So
yeah, the idea that marrying is about love.
And some of those places are in this country.
Yeah. The idea that marrying is about love is a very new concept, actually. It's not what it was about. And I think we pretty much established that it was about protecting property and dowries and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even go into the whole, Mormon polygamy thing. I mean, I know one of their arguments is they were protecting women. Again, they couldn't have property rights, so if you were a widow, you would want to be married off to somebody, and you wouldn't care if they had a partner already, because otherwise you lost everything just because your husband died. So, I mean, again, it's so much of it is property law and taxes and inheritance, stuff like that. But again, it's when people are talking about marriage in today's world, I think we are talking about, as you say, a brand new concept, historically, of this, choosing your mate based on who you're attracted to and who you want to build your life with.
We're talking the romance novel marriage here.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking the ideal of romantic love.
Yeah. I think most people, when they talk about marriage, again, this idea that it's been the same thing for 2,000 years, how could you change it now? It's not been the same thing for 2,000 years, but when we do say marriage in this country, we are all kind of talking about the same thing. We're talking about two adults who have chosen to spend their life together. I mean, again, you could find exceptions to it, but I think when we're having this discussion, wouldn't you say that's what most of us picture?
So gay marriage...
Two adults that got drunk in Las Vegas and made a mistake.
So gay marriage is incompatible with beliefs, sacred texts, and traditions of many religious groups. The Catholics, Islam, United Methodists, Southern Baptists, yada, yada, yada.
Then they shouldn't have gay marriage.
Michael, go.
Yeah, sometimes their beliefs don't match their own sacred texts. If you look at the acceptance of polygamy in America versus the literacy and biblical literacy in America, you'll see that when the Bible was used to teach literacy to people, more people were accepting of polygamy. And as settlers spread out west, the Mormons settled in Utah, and they had no problem with polygamy when the Bible was used to teach literacy. But as soon as a flood of new American books and novels were written, and there was all these other ways to learn how to read, and the Bible sort of just kind of collected dust on the shelf, all of a sudden polygamy falls out of favor. And it's easier to find bigotry against polygamy. And then all of a sudden, even their own majority-held state of Utah outlaws polygamy,
Right.
So sometimes their sacred texts, which would teach that polygamy has been okay for thousands of years, that it doesn't match their beliefs now of what their religion is.
Ian?
Well, the simplest thing to that is, okay, guess what, you guys? don't have gay marriage. If you don't want to marry someone of your own sex, that's fine. We're not telling you have to. That's the whole thing. That argument's one of the worst because of that. It's so easy. No one's forcing you to marry someone of the same sex. That's not even on the table. So why is it an issue? Because, sacred text, wearing clothing of two fabrics, eating shellfish. There's so many things that are in the sacred text that certain religions can't follow that we don't have any problem with. I mean, we sell shrimp and lobster and crab in our stores. That's against the Jewish text. According to this logic, we can't do that.
Yep. Gay marriage will lead to more children being raised in.
And I'm sorry, before we get off of that one, can I just
yes,
real
you can.
quick? I mean, I just want to say, as you look at these arguments, they all have this slippery slope language in them. Some explicitly say it's a slippery slope. Others have stuff like, expanding may lead churches to being forced to marry couples and children being taught. I mean, it's, again, this paranoia. It's right there in the language. Why this is not a good argument is because it's making connections that are not justified.
Right.
It seems like almost all of these have that kind of piece to it. So,
all right.
Logically they fail just in terms of logic, just based on their language, not even what they're saying.
So this next one, though, is the one that I hear a lot as being one of the main reasons that we can't have, gays getting married. Gay marriage will lead to more children being raised in same-sex households, which are not optimal environments for raising children because children need both a mother and a father. Girls who are raised apart from fathers are reportedly at higher risk of early sexual activity and teen pregnancy.
And I don't think that's necessarily justified.
And
it basically that right there says, and don't allow single family parents to raise their kids either.
Or get divorced. Because that's what they're pulling these numbers from, are divorced families that the child was. Yeah, I mean,
right.
So it's just another one of those kind of ridiculous ones.
And it's saying if they're pulling this from divorced families, then there's a lot of other factors that don't have anything to do with that particular causation.
They're not
usually a divorced family goes through an awful lot of pain and suffering before the divorce, which is going to cause the kids to go, off mission and earlier sexual activity and whatnot, just simply because of being raised in an unhappy household.
Yeah, so I think that the studies that they've done with same-sex couples, where they've actually looked at couples raising children, that the children have been no worse off. And in fact, in some cases, they've been better off.
Right.
So they're not.
Yeah, I think they've shown that two lesbians raising a child is actually apparently the highest outcome statistically.
Right.
And again, there's so much that goes into it. This particular one that you're talking about here talks about how observed that 25% of sampled young adults raised by lesbian mothers had engaged in a homoerotic relationship, compared to 0% of sampled young adults raised by heterosexual mothers. I've got anecdotal evidence that proves that 0% wrong. Again, this idea.
Odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's how you answer questions, right? The idea that, too, that they'd like to say is that, if you have gay parents, you're going to be, you're going to grow up to be gay. Well, we have lots of data that shows that that's not necessarily true. And considering we don't have any, historically same-sex marriage, where'd all this gay people come from? Straight households. My parents are straight. It's not the determining factor.
Right.
The only thing you can really strongly prove hereditarily, as far as the difference between what goes on with the parents and the children, is that sterility turns out to be hereditary. Because if your parents didn't have any children, you won't either.
They do have some numbers that I haven't verified that say that girls raised in same-sex institutions are more likely to experiment with same-sex.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily.
You have to wonder, will they admit to it more often because they've been raised in a household where obviously this is not the worst thing you could admit to? Could it have something to do with it?
What the hell is wrong with them experimenting?
Nothing.
There's nothing whatsoever wrong with experimenting. If, we all pretty much believe that, I think we all pretty much believe that homosexuality is a biological imperative rather than, whether it's a choice or a biological imperative really doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with experimenting and finding out who you are and what you want. Yeah. You may experiment and you decide that you want an opposite-sex relationship. You may experiment. You find that you want relationships with both same-sex and opposite-sex partners.
Yeah, and we are dealing with people who do think that there is something wrong. I mean, it does follow. If you do think there's something wrong with being gay, and, then people say, well, we think we should institutionalize it, I get where they're coming from. It's just I don't think that they have a whole lot of extra biblical or extra holy book reasoning for it. It all goes right back to that, and then you throw separation of church and the state, and their argument kind of falls apart.
Yeah. So they have to fall back on gay cooties.
Did you guys look through the 12 reasons gays shouldn't be allowed to marry?
I did.
Yeah,
that was actually pretty amusing.
Yeah, but it sums things up pretty well. Heterosexuality or homosexuality isn't natural, much like eyeglasses, polyester, and birth control. Homosexual marriages are heterosexual marriages are valid because they produce children. Infertile couples, old people, can't legally get married because the world clearly needs more children.
Right. 7 billion is not enough.
Right. Gay parents will raise gay children, since straight people only raise straight children.
What?
Back to the pro-con. Just real quick, touching back on the pro-con article.
Yeah.
You remember we talked about this relationship to, we talked about the relationship to interracial marriage, and their con number 13 actually addressed that. They're saying it's not a choice to be black, but it is a choice to be homosexual. So
wait a minute, Kimberly, were you raised by gay parents?
No, you missed that while
you missed that.
No, my parents were in fact straight. Yeah.
Oh.
Surprisingly, yeah.
Well, then how did you end up being gay?
Oh, because I'm a rebel and I hate God. No,
Oh.
I'm trying to make the little baby Jesus cry. I don't know. Yeah, it's clearly, as we've talked about before, I think it is absolutely biologically conditioned. There's a lot of people who wish they didn't have the attractions that they had, but they do. But, I'm also a big supporter of the point that even if it were just a choice, and I don't think it is, it doesn't seem like it should be an invalid choice.
No, I guess I want to touch on this a little bit, but Stacy, her situation might almost be more interesting.
Oh, sure. I'm boring.
Yeah, because she was married for a long time. She has several kids, and now she's with you. That sounds like a far more interesting story than I was always gay. I grew up that way.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And I won't, I don't want to tell her story. It's
hers
to tell, but there's lots and lots of people who have that kind of story. Yeah, where they kind of realize it later, or there's even terminology for it, and I'm skipping on what it is right now, but people who find that rather than being attracted to a specific gender or a set of genitals, are attracted to a person. And when it comes to them, they don't find that's, the deciding factor is who the person is. They might not be attracted to, if it's a woman, she may not be attracted to any other women, but just this one, and that's who she wants to be with, or a guy, who's attracted to this one guy, or,
right.
Or whatever. And I certainly don't want to, start saying that there are no such things as bisexuals. There's people who are physically attracted to both.
Kimberly, I think you mentioned in the past that you're attracted to women and Nathan Fillion.
Yes. Yeah,
right.
Nathan Fillion's on my switcheroo list. If he's listening, just give me a call. We can work something out.
He's on mine too, so.
That's right. Dude, okay, we're getting to a point where, we've gone quite a while here. What else do we need to hit on this topic? What else is important that we have missed?
Well, it's probably not important, but the thing about the Life with Archie number 16 comic book started off as a $4 comic book, and about 2 weeks after that comic book flew off the shelves, it's now being sold for $50 a pop on eBay. The thing about that comic book is that it features a same-sex marriage between one of Archie's friends and his partner.
Yeah, I haven't wanted to read an Archie comic book for at least 35 years, since I was 5.
How about,
but I'd pick that one up.
How about this? Marriage is not a right. Society can choose to endorse certain types of sexual arrangements and give support in the form of benefits to these arrangements.
And
It's an
that
interesting-
it's an interesting argument, but it's not a good argument because you're basically saying that you are choosing certain people to be second-class citizens and to lose certain benefits that you bestow because of their choices. It's essentially saying that you're criminalizing something because you don't like it.
Right.
It's nearly the same as criminalizing it.
But then later they say, marriage is a religious right, according to a July 31st, 2003 statement from Congress for the Doctrine of Faith and Appropriations by Pope John Paul II. Marriage was established by the Creator with his own natural, essential properties and purpose. No ideology can erase from the human spirit the certainty that marriage exists solely between a man and a woman.
That is the
And that's
Adam and
coming
Eve
from a
versus Adam
completely
and Steve
celibate
argument.
guy. Yeah,
That's
and
the
you
Adam
want to
and
take
Eve
all your
versus
sex
Adam and
advice
Steve
from the
argument.
celibate, don't you?
Well, it's like getting advice about, oral sex from a little old lady who doesn't eat pork.
That's
Now
not
you're
the
cutting into
analogy.
Robin Williams.
No, yeah, Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Yeah, but you're talking Robin Williams jokes.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's stolen. It's a stolen joke. Sorry.
Well, and again, it goes back to this idea that the churches want to believe that they invented this, which they didn't, and they want to forget that there's a separation of church and state, which they don't like. Yeah, what Pope John Paul says is great. And again, my whole family, I was raised Catholic. My whole family's Catholic. They believe anything that comes out of the man's mouth, they can. And I'm not do anything to stop them from doing it. I just don't think it needs to go into my laws.
Kimberly, I do need to address something though you said earlier about making the baby Jesus cry.
Yeah.
He grew up. He grew up. He grew to the age of 33. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I think that
What's
the one
what's
thing.
that quote from the Talladega Nights? I just like that.
Talladega Nights.
You're not telling the whole story there, dude.
What's
Grew
the
up to the age of 33. We don't think he was married. He hung out with 12 guys all the time.
Well, if you follow the Da Vinci Code, though, apparently one of the guys was actually Mary Magdalene.
Uh-huh.
Wait, so are we saying that transvestites happened even then?
Yep.
Well,
Historical
they all wore
transvestite.
dresses.
All right. I think the one thing that we have established tonight is that the church didn't invent marriage and should not have any sort of stranglehold on it.
Yep.
I think
I mean, absolutely. I think if they want each of us, each of the gays to sign a thing that says we will not insist in getting married in your church, we promise, swear, double pinky swear, and all that, we would do it because it's not about that. No one is for. I mean, again, we're talking about equal rights. We're talking about the right to make choices in your life, and I support their choices to be closed-minded bigots. And all I want is them to support my right to love who I choose. I mean, I think it's equal. I'm not trying to stop them
I don't know.
From hating.
Straight,
They can hate.
Straight marriage will be less meaningful if gays are allowed to marriage, since Britney Spears' 55-hour marriage, just for fun marriage, was so meaningful.
I didn't the Kardashian marriage though? Didn't that?
No,
that
no.
actually...
Oh no, a Kardashian is 72 days.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah, so I figured out how many Kardashians I've been married.
We have legislators. I mean, Newt fucking Gingrich is telling me about sanctity of marriage on his third marriage.
What was that, Michael? We cut you off again. Michael?
Oh, yeah, Kardashian marriages are a little bit classier than Spears marriages.
Yeah.
Well, more syllables at least.
All right. What?
Here, I'll give you one thing to talk about that's kind of maybe not all part of the gay agenda. I do think it is very funny that the people who talk about slippery slope and the fact that popular entertainment and stuff has made stuff like marriage equality far more as we talked about before, it's showing a trend to being accepted. I do think it's really interesting. I do think that Hollywood and our entertainment and stuff does have a huge impact on it. I think we are seeing the results of shows like Will and Grace and, Modern Family having a prominent gay couple adopting children and stuff like that. I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, what's that?
The Birdcage.
The Birdcage. I mean, although that movie sucked really bad. It had funny moments, but oh, what an awful agenda movie. But just it being out there, it really has changed people. When the folks who want to keep this stuff down start complaining about, the secularization of the world and how Hollywood is influencing these things, I feel bad for them because they're absolutely correct. They are losing the war one TV show at a time.
Captain Jack Harkness.
Oh yeah, awesome
Absolutely.
character.
Yeah, Torchwood.
Yeah, but you're making Captain Jack is not gay. Captain Jack will have a relationship with anything.
Yeah, pansexual.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
No, there's a new,
Hands, pots, anything.
I will say that
show.
Ian, let Michael go.
It seems that whatever group it is that they want to oppress, evangelicals will find a way to twist a verse into saying that that group of people can't have those rights. I just saw a billboard was torn down in Pennsylvania that said "Slaves obey your masters," because people were shocked at that. But they forget that just 100 years ago and 200 years ago, those sort of verses were actually used to put down rebellions. Those sort of verses were preached in churches to slaves to tell them, this is your place. And so whenever I hear someone like Gingrich using the authority of the Bible, because the Bible says that they shouldn't have these civil rights, I think, as an atheist, I'm just going to go walk over to my printer and pull out a blank piece of paper, which, it's about as close to a sacred text as I can get for, an atheist. And I'm going to look at it really hard and I'll do some self-reflecting and just decide that I don't want to be a bigot. And so on the authority of, everything that being an atheist tells me, I think that we should have marriage equality and we should all stop being bigots.
All right. So I think that, is there anything else we need to say on this? I think we've hit most of the points.
I just love to throw the challenge out there. We talk a lot of times, or it's talked about in the community, that atheists don't have anything in common except for a disbelief in God. And this is one of those ones where I am still waiting to hear somebody who is a confirmed atheist who understands what that actually means and who is against marriage equality. Because all of these arguments on the pro-con list always seem to come back to a religious reason. And again, I get that. I get if you're taking the Bible literally, you kind of have no choice but to decide. But for a group of people who don't take the Bible literally, I'd love to hear the really serious atheist argument against marriage equality. So I'm throwing that challenge down. The gauntlet is thrown. You gotta wait. You want to say it? We'll have you on the show. I would love to hear it because I've yet to hear it, and it just strengthens my argument that we have a lot in common as a community.
Right. Michael, tell us where we can find you, and tell us a little bit more about the kind of stuff that you do with your YouTube channel.
With my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about skepticism, and lately I've been doing a lot of getting other people's activism out. Right now, I am a voter registration drive organizer for this year, and I just became a caucus delegate because a lot of us who were part of certain activism groups decided to be more politically involved. And so that's been very interesting. I've been swallowing hard every day, every time I get something in the mail. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Agent of Doubt.
All right.
And my voter registration drive is votingandaction.org.
And, I gotta say, I think it's important to be part of the caucuses and stuff like that. I went and caucused, and in fact, I ran my precinct caucus this year. I've done it for the last 2 years in a row. And of course, and I will be also a delegate. So I think being involved in government at that level it's certainly an experience, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right.
It's doing something.
All right. Anything else?
It's been great having you on, Michael.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
I do have one more thing.
Oh, yeah, please.
Here in Colorado Springs, we have a group of ministers. They call themselves Community Ministers Unlimited. If you are gay and you want a commitment ceremony, if you're pagan, if you're Jewish, they, as a group of different faiths and non-faiths, they will minister to anyone. And Professor Dean Tollefson is the one who runs it, and his number is 719-633 8635.
And of course, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yes, we will.
All right. Anything else, guys? And gal?
I think that's it.
Have I singled you out enough tonight, Kimberly?
Oh, no, it's fine. You know I love being able to talk all I want.
Yes, I know. I know. All right. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
You can leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics podcast at 720-295-7785. Music for this podcast was provided by OFM. To find out more about OFM, go to myspace.com/OFMHQ. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons, No Derivatives 3.5 license. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics podcast.
Amateur Skeptics website, Facebook, and podcast album art is provided by and copyright Shadow Knight Digital Portraiture. Larger prints or custom pieces are available upon request.